So guys, Yulia Bone over here. We continue study the principles of microeconomics with chapter 5, and chapter 5 is all about elasticity. So guys, just bear with me through all the videos in this chapter in order for you to understand the idea what is elasticity all about. So just the basic idea, just the kind of definitions that elasticity measure how much change in one variable is going to affect another variable. So pretty much we have some kind of two measures, and we go in changing one measure, we change in one variable. Our question is how much the other variable is going to be affected. So this is what elasticity is all about. And one type of elasticity that we measure, in this chapter is going to be price elasticity. So for example, if we changing the price of the product, and the example is going to be with the website, our question is how much quantity demanded is going to change, or by how much quantity demanded is going to change. So therefore the definition, elasticity is numerical measure of responsiveness or sensitivity of quantity demanded and quantity supplied to one of its determinants. So let's look at this. So guys, let's look at this example to understand elasticity a little bit better. So your local business, everybody's following me, your local business, and you designing website. You charging $200 per website, and you design 12 websites per month, but your costs are rising, including the opportunity cost of your time, and you considering increasing the price of the product to $250. So just think about it. When you're raising the price of the product, you're trying to increase your revenue. So now you're going to get $50 more for each website that you're designing. So just think about, from one point of view, you're going to get more money for each unit that you're selling. But remember, we know that based on the law of demand, when you increase the price of the product, what happens with the number of units that you're going to sell? When the price is higher, quantity demanded is going to decrease. So just think about this one more time. You increasing the price of your website, and yes, you're going to get $50 more for each website that you design, but you know that when the price of the product is increasing, you're going to sell less websites. So therefore, what is going to happen with your revenue? Which one of this effect is going to prevail? Will you increase your revenue because you're charging $50 more per website? Or maybe your revenue is going to stay the same or even decrease because now you're selling less websites. And the answer is going to be, it depends on elasticity. So everything depends on elasticity. Guys, you will find the products on the market that there are some products on the market. You increase the price of that product by a lot, quantity demanded is going to change, but it's going to change only by a little bit. And we will find products on the market that if you increase the price only by a little bit, people are going to say, you know what, I'm not going to buy this product, and therefore quantity demanded is going to change by a lot. So all this depends on elasticity of our demand curve. Remember, once again, elasticity, we change in one variable, we change in price, and our question is how's changing price is going to affect our other variable. Here we go. Again, we change one variable. Elasticity is all about how changing one variable affect our other variable. So we're going to keep moving, and we're going to talk about let's talk about this formula. So price elasticity of the demand, if we want to calculate it, we're going to use this formula, and the formula is over here, percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. And they're just giving us very, very simple example. If the price of the product increasing by 10%, then quantity demanded decreasing by 15%. Remember, guys, I'm going to emphasize that the law of demand exactly works on the graph. Remember, when price is higher, quantity demanded is decreasing, exactly what we see on the graph. And then in order for us to calculate price elasticity of the demand, we're just going to plug the numbers into a formula. They did it over here, and therefore price elasticity of the demand curve is equal to 1.5. Guys, we're going to talk in the next video what is this 1.5 mean. So, but this is the basic idea. If you want to find the price elasticity of the demand curve, then you're going to use this formula. So what determines price elasticity? And the price elasticity is going to be determined by 4 determinants. remember, we had determinants for demand curve, we had determinants for supply curve. Price elasticity also have determinants. And in order for us to understand these determinants, we're going to take an example, okay, of 4 different scenarios. And in each of these scenarios, we're going to increase, we're going to have 2 goods, and we're going to increase price of those 2 goods by 20%. And then we're going to kind of to decide all together, well, if we increase price of this particular good by 20%, what is going to happen with the quantity demanded? Okay, so this is what I guys want you to keep in mind when we're analyzing determinants of the demand curve, that we usually have relatively elastic demand and relatively inelastic demand. So relatively elastic and relatively inelastic demand. If we're talking about elastic demand, it means that consumers are sensitive to a price change. Consumers are sensitive. You might want to write it down to analyze, our determinants in the next slide. So consumers are sensitive to price change. So triangle is going to be for change. So therefore, when we're talking about elastic demand, quantity demanded is going to change by a lot. Quantity demanded changing by a lot. So relatively elastic demand, this is where consumers very sensitive to a price change. You increase price only by a little bit, quantity demanded is going to change by a lot. And if we're talking about inelastic demand curve, this is where customers not sensitive. I'm going to put it over here. Customers are not very sensitive to price change. Hopefully you write this down to price change. And therefore, you can change the price, for example, increase by a lot. Quantity demanded is going to decrease, but it's going to decrease only by a little bit. So quantity demanded is decreasing, but it's decreasing only by a little bit. So this is going to be inelastic demand curve. So keep this in mind in order to analyze our next for example. So here you go. We have breakfast cereal versus sunscreen. So this is the first example. And guys, you can write it down that the name of this determinant is availability of close substitutes. Like close substitute, it means similar. So close substitutes. So availabilities of close substitutes. So think about breakfast cereal. Here you go. You have breakfast cereal. You go to the store and you see that the price of breakfast cereal increased, let's suppose, by 50%. What are you going to do? Are you still going to buy breakfast cereal, or are you going to buy something instead? And the answer is you're going to buy something instead. Guys, remember, we're taking into consideration that nothing else happened but this event. So here you go. The price of breakfast cereal increased by 20%. We need to decide together what happened with the quantity demanded for breakfast cereal. And since breakfast cereal has a lot of close substitutes available on the market, instead of breakfast cereal, you can buy waffles, you can buy pancakes, you can buy breakfast food, bacon and eggs. So there is oatmeal, there is a lot of stuff available for you out there to buy something instead. So therefore, if the price of breakfast cereal increasing by 20%, you're saying, you know what, I'm not buying breakfast cereal, I'm going to buy something else. So therefore, quantity demanded of breakfast cereal is going to decrease by a lot. Remember, when quantity demanded decreasing by a lot, it means we're talking about elastic demand. And if we have elastic demand, so it means that elasticity, if we're going to put in this formula, remember price elasticity, this is percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. If you're going to put numbers in this formula, then the result going to be that price elasticity is relatively high. That number is going to be a higher number. And if we take in sunscreen, and let's suppose the price of sunscreen increasing by 20%, what are you going to do? Are you still going to buy sunscreen? And the answer is yes, because there is not enough, or there is no close substitutes available. What are you going to do instead of using sunscreen? Pretty much we don't have anything. Probably, you're going to say, I'm going to be less in the sun and I'm going to sit under the umbrella. But in reality, what is going to happen? Yes, people going to buy less sunscreen. Some of you going to buy less sunscreen, but quantity demanded for sunscreen is going to decrease only by a little bit. So it's going to be a small change in quantity demanded for sunscreen, because once again, there is no close substitute available. Guys, remember, if quantity demanded changing only by a little bit, it means that this is relatively inelastic demand. Relatively inelastic demand, and price elasticity, if we're going to put in this formula, is going to be relatively low. So consumers are not sensitive. So over here, consumers are not sensitive to price change. Okay, so therefore determinant is availability of close substitutes. If we have a lot of close substitutes available, demand is going to be relatively elastic. If we don't have a lot of close substitutes available, demand is going to be relatively inelastic. So guys, I hope that at least after this example, you kind of have this general broad idea what is elasticity is all about. Let's move on to a new one. So next example, over here we have blue jeans versus clothing. And the determinant that we're talking about here is broad market versus narrow market. So let's think about it all together. Remember, blue jeans is going to be narrow market and clothing is going to be broad market. So if we're going to take only blue jeans, so everything else on the market stays the same. If we're going to take only blue jeans and increase the price of blue jeans by 20%, what do you think is going to happen with the quantity demanded for blue jeans? And the answer is going to be that quantity demanded is going to drop by a lot, because this is only a narrow category out of all the entire clothing that we have on the market. So therefore, instead of buying blue jeans, we can buy shorts, we can buy khakis, we can, ladies can buy leggings and stuff like that. So therefore, there are, other things that we can buy instead of blue jeans. Therefore, quantity demanded is going to decrease by a lot. Remember, is it elastic or inelastic demand? This is elastic demand, because quantity demanded changed by a lot. So our sensitivity to a price change is relatively high. Okay, we're very sensitive to a price change. And remember, if we're going to put in the formula, then elasticity is going to be relatively high. That number, when you put in that formula, percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price, that number is going to be turned out relatively high. And we'll talk about this number, in a little bit. So, and then our second example, it's clothing. Guys, remember, clothing, it's a broad market. Here you go. Clothing, it's a broad market. Let's suppose, for whatever reason, hypothetical example, that the price of all clothing is increasing by 20%. What do you think is going to happen? People are still going to buy it, isn't it? Because, we like to buy clothes. Yes, price is increasing. Once again, quantity demanded of clothing. Remember, clothing, it's a broad market. So broad market. Quantity demanded is going to decrease based on the law of demand. If you increase the price of the product, quantity demanded is going to be lower, but it's going to decrease only by a little bit. So therefore, for the broad market, sensitivities, customer sensitivity to a price change, sensitivity to price change is low. So it's going to be, remember, relatively inelastic demand curve. And remember that elasticity, the numerical measure, I'm just going to put over here price elasticity, we're going to learn how to calculate it in a little bit, is going to be relatively low as well. So that's the second determinant. So guys, once again, remember, the elasticity, the price of the product is changing. Our question is, by how much quantity demanded is going to change. So we know based on the law of demand, when you change the price of the product, if you increase in the price of the product, quantity, when your price of the product is increasing, we know that quantity demanded is going to decrease. But our question is by how much quantity demanded is going to decrease. Remember, there are some products of the markets where quantity demanded increasing by a little bit, but there are some products on the market where quantity demanded changing by a lot or decreasing by a lot. So this is all about elasticity. Two more examples. Insulin versus Caribbean vacation. So we take insulin and we increasing the price of insulin by 20%. What do you think is going to happen with the quantity demanded? Believe it or not, quantity demanded almost not gonna drop, because insulin, it's such a detrimental medicine for your health that if you don't take it, you're probably going to die. So therefore, consumers, what are they going to do? They're going to do adjustments in their income somewhere else, but they're going to say, you know what, I need insulin. So therefore, if the price, oh guys, and this is going to be necessity versus luxury. So the name of this determinant, necessity versus luxury good or luxury goods. So insulin is a necessity. You increase the price of the product, quantity demanded here changing only by a little bit. So therefore, remember, we're talking about inelastic demand. We are not sensitive, customers not sensitive to price change, and elasticity, that price elasticity of the demand curve when we calculate is going to be relatively low. And then we're taking our Caribbean vacations. Here you go. This is a luxury good. What do you think is going to happen with the quantity demanded for vacations if the price is going to increase by 20%? People are going to say, you know what, I can live without the vacation. Okay, this is not detrimental for my life. So therefore, if the price of luxury product increasing by 20%, people are going to say, you know what, I'm not going to buy it. Like, I can live without that. So therefore, if we're talking about luxury product, okay, we increase the price of the product, quantity demanded is going to decrease by a lot. We can get by without the luxury product. We don't need it. So therefore, here elasticity is relatively high. We are sensitive to price change, and quantity demanded here changing by a lot. And very last example, short run versus long run. So example here, so short run versus long run. This is the name of the next determinant. An example here is gasoline. So guys, just think about it. If you getting up tomorrow in the morning and the price of gasoline increased from whatever, I think it's probably like $2 and I don't know, 50 or 80 cents right now, and the price of gasoline increased to $4, what are you going to do tomorrow? Tomorrow you're still going to buy gasoline. So in the short run, that is tomorrow, you're still going to buy gasoline because you still need to go to work, you still need to go to school, parents have to take their kids to school, you need to visit your elderly parents that you usually visit 3 times a week. So therefore, in the short run, quantity, if we change in the price of the product, quantity demanded is going to change, but it's going to change only by a little bit. Quantity demanded is changing, but it's only changing by a little bit. So economists usually saying that with the gasoline, it usually takes people long run, it's going to be at about 1 year when people are going to make adjustments to their lifestyle. If you live far from where you work, you either going to move closer to where you work, or you're going to find a job closer to where you live. If you have elderly parents that you, for example, drive, every 40 minutes, 3 times a week or 4 times a week to visit them, you're going to move closer to them, or you will, move your parents closer to you. So it takes it about a year to change our behavior. And in 1 year, people are going to drive less, and therefore quantity demanded for gasoline is going to decrease by a lot. So in the short run, we are not sensitive to a price change. So not sensitive to price change. So therefore, in the short run, elasticity is going to be relatively low, or we're talking about inelastic. We're talking about inelastic demand. And in the long run, when we made, certain adjustments to our lifestyle, then we're going to talk about relatively elastic demand. Relatively elastic demand, we're going to be more sensitive. So we are more sensitive to price change, and elasticity is going to be relatively high. That numerical number is going to be relatively high number. So really quick, guys, so this is the summary of elasticity of our demand curve. I'm going to put it over here. So if we have I put a lot of close substitutes, then elasticity is high. And if we have no substitutes, then elasticity is low. The next one, remember, we talk about narrow market and broad market. So if we're talking about narrow market, okay, then elasticity is going to be relatively high. If we're talking about luxury goods, elasticity is going to be relatively high. Remember, narrow market, we change, for example, for narrow market the price of some kind of chocolate mint Oreo cookie. So it's a very narrow category. You increase the price of that cookie by 50%, we're going to say, you know what, there are so many other cookies out there on the market. I can buy some kind of different type instead. So therefore, elasticity is high. Or with the narrow market, another example, let's suppose we're going to take toothpaste. If you going to increase the price of toothpaste of some kind of extra sensitive, rapid relief, whitening toothpaste, Colgate, okay? So only that particular toothpaste increasing in price, you're saying, you know what? I don't need to buy it. I can buy, different types instead. So therefore, elasticity here is high, versus if the price of all toothpaste are going to increase, then you're still going to buy it because you need to brush your teeth. Quantity demanded is going to, decrease, but it's going to decrease only by a little bit. So broad market, elasticity is going to be low. Luxury good, elasticity is high. And remember, over here, necessity, elasticity is relatively low. And then remember, we talk about in the long run, elasticity is relatively high. And in the short run, elasticity is relatively low. So this is low elasticity. We are not very sensitive to price change. Okay, quantity demanded changes by a little bit, and elasticity, that numerical measure, is relatively low. And here is going to be vice versa. So I'm not going to write it down, but we are sensitive to a price change. Then quantity demanded changes by a lot, and elasticity numerical measure is going to be relatively high. So guys, I hope after this video you kind of understand, general idea what is elasticity all about.